Zoom, Teams, Slack, workers are more connected than ever in some ways, but a new Wall Street Journal report says these digital connections are helping alienate many Americans. 58% of U.S. adults say they are lonely, up from 46% before the pandemic in 2018. The WSJ says the way Americans work is egging on loneliness. Workers tripled the time spent in meetings since 2020, according to Microsoft data, which leaves less time for the water cooler and casual interactions that social scientists say foster happiness at work. And in another study, 68% of people said they actually knew their coworkers on a personal level, down from 79% 5 years ago.
NYU professor Scott Galloway went viral for talking about how loneliness is impacting young men specifically. Let's watch.
And we have the deepest resourced, most talented people in the world trying to give young men a false impression that they can have a reasonable facsimile of life on a screen and with an algorithm. They're not going out, they're not getting a plan, they don't have the confidence to approach strangers for mentorship, for friendship, they're not getting jobs. And I hear from mothers and I hear from women. You know who wants more economically and emotionally viable men? Women.
So yeah, obviously we've known empirically this has been demonstrated as a problem, right? It's obviously because we had this society where men were expected to be the sole provider, they were expected to be very manly and strong and hide their emotions. And even if you talk to very progressive workers today, I was talking to Dan Osborne, he's a steam fitter, he's been a union guy his whole life, he's running as an independent in Nebraska, and he was like, I always wanted to be the provider for my family. And women can do whatever they want. I respect my wife, her views, but he still felt this internal pressure. And with that pressure, there's this tendency to not want to show emotions and not want to rely on your friends for support. That's lonely. We've also seen the decline of community in America. That's been demonstrated empirically as well. But I think just interpersonally, even knowing there isn't this sense of community, loneliness is a problem when the world's more interconnected than ever through social media. And that's just interesting. Because if we're having more conversations and interacting with more people on a daily basis, theoretically, we should be less lonely.
Yeah, I mean, there's something obviously to interpersonal interactions that happen face to face that you simply can't replicate through a screen or through whatever digital means. The point about men is interesting because I think to some extent it is true that men do feel the pressure to hide their emotions, but at the same time, we've seen that there's been a lot of destigmatization and campaigns to get men to be more emotional and open up over the past 5 to 10 years specifically, but we've actually seen the male loneliness problem get worse. So I think there might be something else going on that helps explain what exactly is driving that epidemic. And I'm not sure what that is, but I think it goes beyond probably just the feeling of, I guess people would describe it as toxic masculinity, that men can't open up. And at the same time, we also see more people going to therapy than ever. And yet we see rising rates of mental illness among both young men and women increasing, especially young women's mental illness rates are increasing actually faster than men's, which is the first time that that's ever happened in modern history. So I don't know what the solution is. I don't know exactly what's driving it, but I think maybe some of the explanations that we have attached to this problem don't fully capture really what's going on.
Right. My brain goes to economic issues, which you know me, our viewers know me. That's where it usually goes. But I think about, that pressure to be a provider. I know, my dad had that too. And I think about the state of the economy and how easy it is to lose your job and how hard it is to find a good job where you can pay the bills, especially if you want to be a single income household or you're forced to be. And so I think that pressure as well on men specifically to be a provider in an economy that's not a good one for workers. That's really lonely because your family's depending on you. You might feel like they don't understand what you're going through because they might not be paying attention to the labor market. They might not know why you can not find a good job. And we have this sort of culture that if you're not doing well economically, it's because you're just not smart enough, you're not working hard enough. And it might be factors, and usually it is, that are completely out of your control, especially in small towns across America where we've seen deaths of despair, especially among white men, skyrocket. And in these areas, there were a lot of company towns where people relied on one big company to be the place they worked their entire lives and probably where their kids will get a job. And so when you have big companies move away, that exacerbates this issue.
Yeah, I completely agree that the economic factors are very, very real, especially in small town and rural America. We've seen the offshoring of manufacturing that's hollowed out the middle and working class in America for a long time now, due specifically to the policies that many politicians enacted in the 80s and 90s to globalize trade, because they thought that it was going to better people's lives to be able to buy more goods more inexpensively. What ended up happening, of course, is that we don't really make anything in the United States anymore. You have an entire generation of men who don't have transferable skills to other industries and have found themselves really floundering and either getting laid off a bunch, going from job to job, not being able to provide for their family on a single income. I do think that that is very real.
I think America is also this kind of country where people move away from home. Where I grew up, moving away from home was an indicator of success, that you got out. And it's interesting because that's lonely. As soon as you grow up, suddenly now you're leaving all of your friends behind, maybe you're going to college, maybe you're just moving somewhere you've never been before with one or a few friends. But at this point, I think a lot of people in their adult lives, their friends are very spread out, especially if they meet a partner and they move to their partner's hometown or wherever they live. That's sad. And that's why I'm starting the Bring Jess's Friends to One City initiative. So all my friends moved to Charlotte, North Carolina. And I think most people are in that place where it's lonely to have your friends so far away. You can see them like once a year if you can afford to travel. That's really sad, and it's kind of become a part of our culture that I think people are questioning. I'm hearing more and more about people that are around our age that are actually deciding to move back home, which is good because a lot of towns across the country have seen brain drain happen.
Absolutely. It definitely contributes to that pulling of talent away from small towns, which unfortunately only means more businesses and more opportunities leave the town with that talent. And a lot of people now, when they start their families, are not having, first of all, multi-generational households, which used to be the norm in America, but they live far away from their parents. They don't get help with childcare. They don't get help with a lot of the things that they might need, especially if both parents are working, and that can lead to loneliness as well. I do think, going back to what we were getting at in the beginning with social media, the replacement of interpersonal communications with digital communications has had a really devastating effect on a lot of young people. People spend more time on their phones and their computers than ever, and they claim it's because they're creating online communities, which is true to an extent. But again, it's just irreplaceable, that actual face-to-face interaction that you have with somebody that I think provides something to your spirit and your soul that just can't be replicated across a screen.
Yeah, loneliness isn't necessarily human interaction of any kind. It has to be genuine. Loneliness is about also feeling understood. I think you go on social media, you see people putting a version of themselves. That's a slice of who they are. It's what they're willing to share. But being with someone in person and connecting and having a long conversation, you can be more real.
Absolutely. We're going to have to leave it there, but we're going to be back with more Rising after this.